Hi class, today's lesson will be chapter 19 and we're going to be working with job order cost accounting and we're going to complete problem 19-4B. You should be able to see problem 1904B, and what you're looking at is a company T accounts for a manufacturing company. The Clapton Company is manufacturing custom guitars in a wide variety of styles. The following incomplete ledger accounts refers to transactions that are summarized for May. You can see here that they've got the balance recorded in the materials account. So there was a beginning balance that was brought forward into the asset account materials. And throughout the month, they had some purchases of materials. What you're going to need to find is how many materials were requisitioned. And so what you need to know about the materials requisitions are which jobs ordered materials throughout this period of time. So I'm going to scroll down to where they've got a little spreadsheet that they prepared for you in table form. This table form or spreadsheet needs to be completed first before we can determine each one of the missing amounts from above. So what we have here is job number 101 that we're working with, as well as job number 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, and 106. All of these jobs we're working with during this period of time. The number of guitars that they're going to be producing are also given by job. So in each job, we're going to complete this number of guitars. That's the total quantity that we're going to be producing throughout this period of time. So at the end of the period, we're going to produce 2,600 guitars. And each one of these jobs reflects the amount of guitars that we are preparing for each individual job. You can see here that there's a blank beside of job number 101 for the beginning work in process. What this means is that you actually started these materials last period, but you did not finish them until this period, where you may have finished them or you may not. That remains to be seen. We'll have to look at that shortly to see whether you finished these jobs. But for job number 101, the beginning amount of work in process is coming from last period's ending work in process. And if you look in your instructions here at Part C, they tell you that the May 1st work in process balance consists of two jobs. Job number 101, the work in process balance from last period brought forward is 26,400. For job number 102, the balance that is brought forward is 46,000. So one of the first things that you need to do is put in the balance of the work in process into the table or the spreadsheet form that they've got for you in requirement number 1. So for job number 101, I'm simply copying the work in process that was given to us from the information above. So 26,400 is the dollar amount of the work in process that was the beginning work in process for job number 101. For job number 102, the work in process beginning amount was 46,000. Again, this is just copied from this information here. And while we're at it, since we're in this column here, we may as well add the entire column together to get the total of the work in process. And technically they've got it right here. So if you just want to pull that and plug it down here, you can, or you can add them together on your calculator. Either way will work just fine. But this is the total of the work in process beginning amount of inventory. Notice each one of the jobs has some materials that are going to be added to what they had already started for job number 101. These are the direct materials that are going to go into the work in process account. When you take materials out of the material storeroom, you'll determine whether they are direct materials or indirect materials. All of your direct materials will enter directly into work in process. All of the indirect materials would go straight into factory overhead. This worksheet right here is just for our jobs or our work in process that we're completing. So for job number 101, we had some direct materials that we're adding to the beginning inventory cost, plus we're also going to add in our direct labor. Another thing that we will need to determine is the factory overhead that is applied. I wish they had written applied factory overhead over the top of this column, because it is an estimated amount of factory overhead, not an actual amount that we're coming up with here. The estimated amount of factory overhead will come from a predetermined factory overhead rate. That predetermined factory overhead rate, you might want to write this down, is determined by taking the estimated amount of the factory overhead for the period of time before the work actually starts in this period. We're going to estimate the total amount of the factory overhead, and we would divide it by the activity level. Your activity level, your activity base could either be direct labor hours, machine hours, or whatever activity is driving the cost. Most of the time when we're going to be looking at these, you'll have to read your instructions to see how the factory overhead was driven. If you look at instruction B here, it says factory overhead is applied to each job at a rate of 50% of the direct labor cost. So our total estimated factory overhead would be divided by the direct labor cost, and that would give us this 50% rate. This is a predetermined rate. We did not have to find the predetermined rate. It was given to us, but I think it's important that you know how they came up with 50%. So they estimated the amount of the factory overhead for that period of time, and then they would have divided it by the total direct labor cost, and that's how they come up with the 50% estimate that they would use in the next period to apply factory overhead. Notice it's 50% of the direct labor cost. The direct labor was given to you for each one of the jobs. So to find the factory overhead amount, you would simply need to multiply the direct labor, and we're going to start with job number 101, 59,400. And you're going to multiply this direct labor by the predetermined factory overhead rate, which was also given to you at 50% in part B here. Do you see where that says 50%? We would multiply the direct labor times 50%, and that will give us the applied amount of factory overhead. So my factory overhead is going to be applied or estimated at $29,700 for this job. The second job, the direct labor, was $72,600. So I'm simply going to take $72,600 and multiply it by 50%. And that's going to give me 36,300. So again, we are taking the amount of the direct labor and we're multiplying it by 50%. So half of 110 is 55,000. That's your applied factory overhead. So 39,600 times 50% is 19,800 that would be applied to job number 104. Half of 66,000 is 33,000. Half of 30,800 is 15,400. It might be a good idea to check your work at this point to make sure you don't have any math errors. And then what we're going to do is there's two ways to find this total. You could add up all of these factory overheads here, or you could take the total direct labor and multiply it by 50%. It'll give you the same thing. So you have a choice there. So 378,400 times 50% gives you 189,200. You could have also just added these together. Now, for each job, it's really important that you need to determine the total cost. And I can see it doesn't like something that I've got in there for the May 1st beginning working process. If you look up here where it was given to you, there's a reason for that. It should be 26,400. So let me change that. Good thing we got to check my works here so it would have alerted me to that. Now, to find the total cost of each job, if we had beginning work in process as we did with job number 101, that becomes a part of the total cost of the job for this period of time. So we're going to add the beginning work in process plus the direct materials plus your direct labor plus your applied factory overhead to get the total cost. So I don't know what that is, so I'm going to pull out my calculator and I'm going to add these costs up, starting with 26,400. To that beginning work in process, I'm going to add 82,500. I'm having a little trouble today. So let's see, 26,400 plus 82,500 plus 59,400 plus 29,700. All that is 198,000. Check my work. It's happy with my total cost for job number 101. So I'm going to look at my total cost for job number 102. Again, 102 had a beginning work in process balance. My beginning work in process is $46,000. If you think about the T account work in process, the beginning work in process would be on the debit side. Your direct materials would be debited to that particular job. So we're going to add $105,000. We're going to take the beginning amount of $46,000. We're going to add to that $105,400. Then we're going to add to that $72,600. And then we're going to add to that $36,300. And that's going to give me a total cost of $260,300. On the next job, 103, notice there is no beginning work in process. That's because we started at this period. And we started this job by adding materials of $132,000 plus direct labor of $110,000. My goodness, I don't know what's happening with the slides here. Let me try this again. $132,000 plus $110,000 plus $55,000. I have a total cost of $297,000. Yeah, I'll check my work, just make sure my math is right. In the next job, we're starting with materials of $66,000. I'm going to add to that $39,600. And I'm going to add to that $19,800. And that's going to give me a total cost of job number 104 of $125,400. Then we're going to look at the next job, which is job number 105, $118,800. And we're going to do that, $66,000. Then we're going to add to that $33,000. that's going to equal that equal 99,000 because these two equal 99,000. Let me go ahead and put in another plus 118,800. And then we're going to add 66,000 and 30,800. And we're going to also add to that the 15,400. And that'll give us a total of 112,200. Now we're going to combine all of the total cost together to get the grand total of the total cost, or you can add these across. That will also give it to you. And either way works. So if we do 72,400, take that out of there, that doesn't belong there. Work on the calculator up here. If we add to it the 570,700, and if we add to that 378,400, and if we add to that 189,200, then our total cost should be 1,210,700. All right. So each job could have had in it beginning work in process, plus your direct materials, plus your direct labor, plus your applied factory overhead. That will give you the total cost. Out to the side here, you'll notice that they're wanting the unit cost. And before we can find the unit cost, we have to do some calculations. And so we need to know exactly how many units we are producing. Over here, we have the quantity that tells us the units that are being produced per job. So we're going to take the total cost of job number 101, which was 198,000, and we're going to divide that by 330 units. And that's going to give us a unit cost of $59.46. We're going to round it to 2 decimal places. Let's check our work just to make sure our math is right. Oh, it didn't like that. So let me try it again. 198,000 is going to be divided by 330 units. And the unit cost is 600. Again, I'm going to take 260,300 and I'm going to divide it by my quantity of 380, and that will give me my unit cost. So 260,300 divided by 380 units is 685. Notice they skipped a blank for job number 103. And the reason for that, for job number 103, is that they did not complete job number 103 during this period of time. And I'm looking to see where they told you that. You see right here where it's got customer jobs completed, they've got job number 103. There's no X mark for that. So job number 103 was not completed during this period of time. And neither was job number 106. But job number 104 was completed and job number 105 was completed. So that's why they have a block here for job number 104. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take the total cost of job number 104, which was 125,400, and you're going to divide that by the number of units that were produced in job number 104, which was 400. And that will give you a unit cost of $313.50. For job number 105, the total cost was $217,800. We will divide that by the number of units that were produced for job number 105, which was 660. So $330 is the per unit cost of job number 105. Again, job number 103 and 106 were not finished during this period of time. To determine the cost of goods sold, we need to know what the units sold were. And in Part D, they told us that the units sold in May was 264 units. So we just write down what was given here. Job number 102, they sold 360 units. job number 103 wasn't finished, so they didn't sell any of them. So units for job number 103 has to be 0. It was given right here too. 384 is the number of units sold out of the next job. And 530 is the number of units sold out of the next job. And then the remaining job, number 106, was not complete. So there would be 0 units sold from that. Then what we'll need to do is determine our cost of goods sold. To determine the cost of goods sold, our per unit cost was $600 for job number 101. And since we sold 264 units, you're going to multiply the unit cost times the unit sold. The unit cost of $600 times the unit sold of 264 gives you the cost of goods sold of $158,400. We need to check our work for that. The unit cost for job number 102 is $685. So $685 times 360, the number of units sold, equals 246,600. There was nothing that was sold, so this has to be nothing. On the next one, the unit cost was $313.50. We would multiply that by the number of units sold, 384. And that will give you 120,384. Again, I'm going to check my work just to make sure the math is right. Then I'm going to take my unit cost of 330. I'm going to multiply that by 530. And that will give me 174,900. Then I'm going to combine all these together, and that's going to be the total cost of my goods sold. And if I've totaled all those correctly, that's going to be my total cost of goods sold. So I finished part 1 here. And so the only thing that part 1 was telling us is basically we need to be able to figure the total cost of each one of the jobs. If we know what the total cost is, if we divide it by the quantity of units that we manufactured, that'll give us the unit cost. And if we know how many units we sold, that came from the information from Part D, we can multiply unit cost times the unit sold, and that will tell us the cost of goods sold. In the next portion of this, they want you to determine the materials that were requisitioned. So we're going to have to go back for just a minute and look at our T accounts because they've got some important information in there for us. Number one, when we're looking at materials, our requisitions are always going to be credited to materials because materials is an asset account. When we request materials to come out of the materials storeroom account, we'd have to fill out the paperwork called a materials requisition. That materials requisitions, all of those added together, would be the total amount that is credited to the materials account. These requisitions can include direct materials as well as indirect materials. So in the spreadsheet that we just completed, or that table that we just completed, you'll notice that they had a listing of all the direct materials, and the total amount of the direct materials was $570,700. This total amount of direct materials plus the indirect materials that were requisitioned will tell us the total materials requisition. So here's part of it right here. These are the direct material portion of this. So in your calculator, put down the total direct materials of $570,000. You're going to add to it the indirect materials. Notice indirect materials are not given here. Just direct materials will affect work in process. Just direct materials will affect the job numbers here. These are direct materials, in other words. To find the total materials that are requisitioned out of the work in process account, we need to know what the indirect materials are. Since it wasn't given here, it has to be given somewhere. And so look through your list of T accounts that they've given to you. Do you notice in your factory overhead, they had given you some indirect materials of $15,400. These $15,400 are going to be added to our direct materials balance, and that will give you the total amount of materials requisitioned. So the indirect materials of $15,400 plus the direct materials of $570,700 gives you the total materials that were taken out of the material storeroom. This again. The materials total, direct materials, is $570,700. I'm going to add to that my indirect materials, which were given in the factory overhead T account of $15,400. Both of those together will equal $586,100. Let's try this again, just to make sure my math is right this time. This time I got it right. So it's direct materials plus your indirect labor. Gosh, indirect materials, excuse me, class. Your indirect materials was given at $15,400. When you add that and the direct materials together, it gives you the total materials requisition of $586,100 that we put right here. Notice this A, $586,100, would be plugged into the T account right here for A. And then you can find the ending amount of the materials by adding your two debits and subtracting your credits from it. Remember, materials is an asset account. So the two debits are added together. We would subtract our requisitions, and that would give you the materials ending balance. I think they're going to ask you for that in just a minute, but I just wanted to reinforce to you that the total of the requisitions goes right here on the credit side of the materials account. When we credit materials, we are decreasing the asset account. We're taking materials out and placing them into production. Your direct materials goes to your work in process, and your indirect materials would go to your factory overhead. They're also asking in B, what is the work in process beginning balance? The beginning balance we have added here, which is $72,400, and these were given amounts. So you could also find them in your information up above, but those are your beginning balances. And this B is going to be entered in to your beginning balance right here in work in process. The C wants only the direct materials that go into work in process are what they want here. The total direct materials is $570,700. Those direct materials, the total of the direct materials is written down on the debit side of the work in process right here. This material should say direct materials. It comes from C from below. That direct materials are this amount right here, and it comes for C2. Your direct labor was also given at $378,400. What you should know about direct labor is it will go directly into work in process. So in my work in process, I should have a D over on the debit side for my direct labor. That's the D part right there. That's the amount that would go into D. Then for E, they want the overhead applied. The overhead applied was what we calculated here. The total overhead applied is $189,200. That $189,200 would go in Part E, which would be debited to the work in process up here. In the next part of this, they want you to determine the completed jobs. So we're going to go back to the information that was given. And we had some completed jobs. And the completed jobs is job number 101. And we had completed jobs of 102. And we had completed jobs of 104 and 105. All of the total cost of those jobs would be added together, and that would give you the total cost of your completed jobs. So let me clear the calculator out here. We finished job number 101. How do I know that? It tells us we've completed it right here. That X mark stands for you've completed job number 101. And job number 101, the total cost of job number 101 was $198,000. So $198,000 is going to be added to the total cost of job number 102. See the X mark here for job number 102? So we're going to go to job number 102, pick up the total cost, which was $260,300. The next job that we completed was 104. And the total cost of 104 is $125,400. And we're going to add to that our last job that was completed, which was job number 105. And 105, the total cost was $217,800. The total jobs completed are 800 and 1,500. These total jobs completed would be added to your finished goods inventory account. So that part F is eventually going to go up here in your finished goods inventory as a debit. The cost of goods sold, we've already calculated right here, $700,284. The indirect labor is not the same as direct labor. Indirect labor, you're not actually working on the product itself. It could be maintenance salaries or janitorial types of salaries. It could be any factory salaries other than those people that are working directly on the products themselves. So if we look at our when we look at our wages payable, you can see here that we have a total amount of wages payable incurred. That total amount right here consists of both direct labor and indirect labor. So we're going to start with 396,000 of total labor. Gracious. 396,000 is our total labor. We're going to subtract from this the direct labor that we know from our table. The direct labor was given right here at 378,400. What that will leave me with is my indirect labor of 17,600. And that's your indirect labor there. And that would go in H. And H in your T accounts was represented right here as the amount of the factory overhead. So what you're doing is you're filling in the blanks to determine the next part, which they're asking you for, is to determine the balance in the materials account. So in the materials account, we have a beginning materials balance plus any purchases of materials. Then we're going to subtract out our materials requisitions. So starting with the materials account at the top of the page, we're going to start with our beginning balance. Because materials is an asset account, our beginning balance is on the debit side. That's the plus side. So we're going to start with 105,600. We're going to add to it our materials that we purchased of 500,000. And then on the credit side, which is our minus side of the asset, we're going to subtract our total requisitions, which came from Part A below. So we're going to back out 586,100 of this. I'm going to subtract it out. And that's going to leave us with not that amount. So let's try this again in the calculator. $105,600 plus 500,000 minus what we have requisitioned I'm having too good of a day with this calculator here. Let me keep trying. 105,600 plus 500,000 minus 586,000 19,500 is what we have left over in our materials account. So your beginning materials plus your purchases minus your requisitions equals your ending materials inventory. We're going to do the same thing for our work in process. We're going to start with the beginning balance, which came from B. Our beginning balance was 72,400. To this balance, we're going to add our direct materials. And the direct materials is 570,700. We could have also gotten it from here. So we're going to add 570,700. And then we're going to add our direct labor to that beginning work in process balance. So it's beginning balance plus our direct materials plus our direct labor, which was 378,400. Then to that, we're going to add our factory overhead applied. Our factory overhead applied was 189,200. So your beginning work in process plus your direct materials plus your direct labor plus your applied factory overhead minus what you completed during that period of time equals the ending balance in your work in process. Your finished goods is going to be the beginning balance of finished goods, which they had no beginning finished goods balance. To that, we're going to add the jobs that we completed, which was part F. We found F down here. This was our jobs completed. And then we're going to subtract from the jobs completed what we sold. They would go out of finished goods and into cost of goods sold. So the cost of our completed jobs was 801,500 because there was no beginning inventory in finished goods. There was no beginning inventory in finished goods. We're simply going to add what we completed, and then we're going to back out what we have sold. So the amount that we have sold is 700,284. that we got over here. Either way, you can see that. We're going to minus the 700,284. And what that will leave us with for our finished goods balance is 101,216. Your factory overhead balance there was a beginning balance that was brought forward, 26,400. To that, we would have to add our indirect labor that we found in H. So we're going to add 17,600. Then we're going to add our indirect materials, which they gave to us in the factory overhead account. And then we're going to add the other factory overhead that we incurred. We're going to add our other factory overhead that we incurred of 122,500. And we're going to subtract our overhead. This was our estimated amount. And our estimated amount most likely is not going to match what our other overhead is. So we've got to subtract out our overhead applied. Our applied overhead was 189,200. A negative amount of 7,300. And it tells you to enter them all as positive numbers, but that is not positive. That should be a negative there. But that's how that operates. So what we did was we added up all of our factory overhead and find the total debits. If the total debits are the actual amount of factory overhead, we compare it to what we estimated. And the difference was 7,300. And because our estimated amount of factory overhead was larger than our actual amount of factory overhead, we actually had an underapplied factory overhead balance here. In other words, we did not estimate enough factory overhead. And that's all they wanted you to do in this problem. So we'll stop sharing this with you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.